the ceremony of our Good Friday commemoration is one that we have conducted without fail since about the early 1960s, and in the course of which various items have become clear to us, which are present in the ritual, present in the reading, and which, however, like so many things that are obvious, need to be called perhaps to our minds. And that is this. It's implicit in the text of the Acts of John, which incidentally is one of several scriptures, all of which are of a more or less Gnostic nature, which are called the Acts. These are not the same as the Acts of the Apostles in the New Testament, but it's the Acts of John, the Acts of Peter, whole bunch of acts. And what it describes the various events at the time of Jesus and when the apostles were doing their work for him in a manner that would be perhaps useful and able to be digested in a more mystical way than various other passages of the New Testament. So what we have here is that there is a missing portion, like so many, which St. John, there are also the Acts of Thomas and various other. The Acts of Thomas are the ones that recount the travels of St. Thomas to India and also the magnificent poem of the how do we call it? Of the pearl, namely, which is a song, as it is called, that has been sung by the Holy Apostle Thomas in the Indies when he had gotten to India, and you know his former grave site is still in India, in the south of India, very near Madras, and therefore very near the Theosophical Society. And there is a whole, I have not been there. Something kept me from going there, even though I had several pretty forceful invitations by various heads of the society, but I somehow never made it. But that's something else. In any event, St. Thomas Mountain is the place where, according to the traditions of the Mar Thoma, the Lord Thomas Syrian Orthodox Church, the Holy Apostle was buried, and actually laid there buried for quite a long time. And then the Syrian Orthodox Patriarchate of Antioch, back in the Middle East, made a request to the Archbishop of Bombay if they couldn't send the remains, the coffin of St. Thomas back there, because after all that's where he lived. They said, yeah, well, that's where he lived, but this is where he died. Nevertheless, they did send the body back. Very close to it, also by St. Thomas Mountain, so I'm told, is another interesting apparition. It is right, so I'm told, not having been there, right where St. Thomas Mountain sort of ends, and actually closer to the Theosophical Society headquarters, there is periodically the appearance of someone whom the locals call a white lady. Now, the white lady comes from time to time. The Christians call her the Blessed Virgin. The Hindus call her by the name of some Hindu goddess, and so forth. But I am assured by our present international president, Tim Boyd, that the white lady still appears. And which of course indicates to you, and among other things, how universal, how archetypal, and really generally available the great apparitions of the order of the greater world are, because they can they can appear to those who are Christians as a Christian apostle, and they can appear in various ways to others. So there is a whole St. Thomas enclave, kind of right where so I'm told, where the park, the garden of the Adyar estate ends, and where the gates open up toward the city of Madras, and there are pilgrims coming there from all over the place, which again indicates to us that the desire for pilgrimage is a universal human trait, and an archetypal one. And to go to holy places, which we recognize as holy, bestows grace on the individual who goes. And this is a very important thing, and that perhaps it's not a bad idea for us when we are able to keep in mind that in the course of our lives, if possible and convenient, we should go to holy places, whether they are Buddhist holy places, Hindu Buddhist places, Muslim holy places. In the holy places, there is something holy. And not only ontologically to say, yeah, well, this is a holy place, but something that you can feel, something that you can internalize, something that increases the powers of holiness within you, which is very, very important. And the next important disclosure, let's say, of the Acts of John, not of Thomas in this case, but the Acts of John, is that, oh, thank you, very kind of you. Yeah. Oh, water is coming from everywhere. Sources. Is that St. John the Apostle, the beloved disciple as he is also called, and who is, portrayed in the various great art works of the Last Supper as sitting next to Jesus as a young man, putting his head and his shoulder and being supported by Jesus. So St. John the Apostle, who kept a record of what went on, especially at the time of the crucifixion at the time of Good Friday, and he then wrote it down. He's, these are very important documents which were regarded as very important and very enjoyable for hundreds of years. In the monasteries they were read for the monks and so forth. They were not made sacred scripture like the Gospels or the epistles, but they were very well known, and they also gave rise to theatrical performances, which later on then were transferred to the cathedrals when they had the cathedrals, and from whence the Easter pageants, great dramatic performances came to us, and they were usually performed in the church as with the various clergy acting out the roles of the different people in the story of Good Friday and the story of the crucifixion and the suffering of the Lord. Now, this is still all introductory to something, and the something is that Saint John, the beloved disciple, was convinced that there were other scriptures which were describing the last days of the Lord. And that one of these involved the fact that when Jesus discovered and disclosed to his disciples that his passion, as it is called, was near, then he said, I have something else to show you. And then he led them into a hall, probably very much like this one, because after all there were only 12 of them. And there he made them form a circle, and St. John describes quite vociferously that then he did something else. So that the implication being, if you are going to be prepared for what is going to happen to me on Calvary, then you have to do this, and you are going to gain the more or perhaps the full meaning of this mystery of the crucifixion and the death. And then Jesus made them stand up in a circle, and he sang a song to them, which is called the Hymn of Jesus, that is present in the Acts of John, and from which we have been reading tonight, because what Jesus does then, he gathers the apostles together, gives them various teachings, but among others says, now I have to lead you in the dance. And so they begin to dance, to rotate around the central figure who is Jesus. And there you might say the secret message of Easter and of Good Friday in a mystical manner is conveyed by Jesus to the apostles. So you might say that there are, very understandably, there are various layers of explanation and understanding of these sacred deeds, including the crucifixion and the suffering of the Lord, but there is also that which was secret, and was kept only for the apostles. And much of it, many of the texts, that the hymn, as it's called, it's also called the hymn of Jesus, that he taught the apostles while they were dancing around him in this mystical dance, was what in a major portion you have just heard today. So the Acts of John, with the hymn of Jesus, are probably one of the most impressive items of proof, indicating that the Lord conveyed secrets on his disciples as well. And that the way we have to look at that, that's not in lieu of. It's not a kind of, I like to be judgmental when I can afford it, but maybe I can't afford it tonight. But let's say it's a story that conveys a very, very important truth. And that very important truth is that in addition to the various other good deeds that Jesus performs for his disciples and for his apostles, there is one which involves a hymn, and hymns are poems that can be musically performed. He performs a hymn for them, and the hymn maintains or contains a great deal of his secret message. So if you listen to the words that were being recited as the brothers and the sisters were moving around the center, where of course we don't conjure up the Lord, but we do that over here on this altar. Because that is where we consider that the real presence to be there even after these 2,000 years. But in any event, he conferred a gnosis on them, which was conferred by dance, by music, and by he being the Kapellmeister, as we call it in German, the one who was leading the dance and leading this particular performance. And the performance indicated that there is a great and profound and truly transcendental mystery that is conveyed by the Lord, especially at this time, and that the mystery does not consist exclusively, as the mainstream churches came to claim, it does not consist exclusively of the Lord's suffering, which has given a lot of people, when you contemplate the crowning with the crown of thorns, then as a priest friend of mine used to say, then you realize that the true faith is of a nature that might give you a headache. So, in other words, here in a mystical language and within a very Gnostic concept, it is conveyed to the apostles that there is a great esoteric secret that is being conveyed, and that by way of participating in this holy dance, they would prepare themselves for the additional mysteries of Easter, of the death and of the resurrection. So I recommend that you read the hymn of Jesus. It's very very beautifully and quite extensively translated and also commented upon by the late great scholar uh, uh, Duncan Greenlees, indicating as to what in a really transcendental way the the entire story of Easter, the drama, the the mystery play really means, and the center of it is the holy dance. Now, once again, like most mystical scriptures, like Saint John of the Cross, or Saint Teresa of Avila, and so forth, one has to, as on other saints, Saint Clement of Alexandria, the only of the Alexandrian fathers who had a respect for the Gnostics. And he said, people shouldn't say all these bad things about the Gnostics. They are called knowers because they know things that you probably don't know. This is Clemens Alexandrinus. In any event, so let's say, actually Duncan Greenlees, the translator and the commentator on that work, and this is in a book published many years ago, one of the many translations by Duncan Greenlees, and it should be considered to our happiness that I think 30 some volumes were planned, but at least 20 some were executed by Duncan Greenlees, who was on Oxford, I think, on Oxford bound, and they were written in and then published and printed by the Theosophical Society in Adyar. And I spoke with a gentleman who lived in Adyar for a long time, Spanish gentleman, and he told me that he really liked Duncan Greenlees, and he used to go over to his house. And then he said, when Duncan Greenlees died, my friend was still there in Adyar, and he said that he was buried by the Roman Catholic Bishop of Madras and the international president, Mr. N. Sri Ram, Narayan Sri Ram of the Theosophical Society. So here was a liturgical action, which a burial is, that was performed by the Theosophists and by Roman Catholics. So I think that in itself is an accomplishment, although it's just in small print in Duncan Greenlees' book. But the important thing is that the Lord did perform some special activities. Duncan Greenlees calls them initiations. And he says that what we are dealing with here is the initiatory dance. And this is not far-fetched, because look, there are several orders of Sufis in the present time who do the same thing. In fact, there was one Sufi order that was established for quite a while here in Los Angeles that did the same thing. And of course, that's the one. I think they are the Naqshbandis, and the way I think their custom started, that the founding teacher was praying. He kept on repeating Allah, Allah, Allah. And he came to a pillar in a room that he was in, and he hung up to the pillar, and he started rotating around the pillar. and that was the beginning of the Sufi dance. You see, so we didn't have a pillar here, but we did, under the circumstances, we did fairly well. So let's see, here is one of the primary proofs to those who accept it, that Lord Jesus Christ was a Gnostic, was an initiator, was a divine magician, and that when these elements are left out from his message, then, well, let's see, then you have a partial Jesus. You see, then you are suppressing something, and something has been suppressed over 2,000 years. But what is suppressed can come back. We have seen it. I have seen it in my own beloved home country, what was suppressed and which has emerged from under the red flags and the hammer and the sickle, is now itself once again, and carries its own message that it carried by now for almost 2,000 years in the apostolic kingdom of Hungary. So what is suppressed is not necessarily gone. Things look as if they are gone, and then all of a sudden here they are. You have to pay attention to that in your own life. You think there are things that you have forgotten, there are things that you don't want to think about, that other people don't want you to think about, and all of a sudden here it is, right in front of you. And not only in front of you, but inside of you, where you understand, where you realize, where you know. And you know, I think that this is one of the greatest promises of earthly life. If this exists about sacred things, patriotic things, all kinds of things, if this phenomenon exists and is valid, then we have found the Holy Grail, and we found the treasure, because this is undoubtedly one of the greatest treasures that can come to us in our lives, and for which, even while we are only thinking about it and expecting it, we should be and remain grateful. So we should remain grateful for the crucifixion, the death of the Lord, his burial, and his forthcoming glorious resurrection. Because it is all part of an initiatory sequence. You don't ask me to explain it, because this is not an intellectual matter. If you look at Jesus' sayings throughout the New Testament even, you'll find that he wasn't intellectualizing. He wasn't a theologian, Jewish theologian or Christian theologian. He was giving out material which people could use and which would aid them in their salvation, their transformation, their Christification. And that is why we Gnostics revere him. And that is why we should revere all the great messengers of light who come here, because a messenger of light is a messenger because he brings light. He is light as well, and that is how he can bring it. In any event, so the whole issue upon which this ritual is in miniature is based has to do really with the mystically transformative and wisdom bestowing activity of Jesus, which was so mysterious that it was even a secret. But it is, like many other things, it's not a secret to the Gnostic. So let us keep that in mind as we are coming now to the last 2 days of the mystery play, which includes, of course, the resurrection. But I think it's, when possible, it's spiritually useful for us to remember that the Lord directed a dance, and he danced it, and by way of that, he disclosed to them the great Gnostic secrets, as we can even see in the words, but which certainly are there by their meaning. So that is our little reconstruction of an ancient truth, which has been helpful to us for these many years, and maybe will continue to be so. I'm very happy that you have come. Of course, in past years we sometimes had this room very full of people, but you know there is a great Gnostic secret, and that's the time when people were expecting a big, long-lasting and raucous party. So we have the partying animal, the party animal Gnostics, and we have the Gnostics who are Gnostics without a party, but not without an animal. So in any event, I think this gives you a little oversight as to what we were really doing here, what we were reenacting, and you know so much of the sacramental life is reenacting. What are we doing at the altar, as I mentioned on Sunday? We are reenacting symbolically and mystically the Last Supper. This is my body and this is my blood. So we are reenacting the mystery that has always been here and that still is here and that will take it onto itself and to its originator in the heavens, and to the one who said to us that in my Father's house are many mansions. So the holy dance is one of the mansions, but there are many others, and I'm very, very happy that you came and could be here, and maybe were somewhat inducted into an experience of this mystery. And so may the mystery of that which hangs with heaven and earth descend upon us and remain with us always.